Hey, horror fans, this is Pete from the Lasser Cast, and I am here on this Tuesday evening to talk about Sunday's episode of Mayfair Witches, episode number 3. And I am with my other coven member, Dr. Zayas God, Danny Torkel. Danny, it sounds like you are super excited to talk about Mayfair Witches.
You know, it's not that I'm not excited. It's just that there's a lot more exciting things that I'd rather talk about. I went to the theater last night, the Alamo Draft House in Brooklyn, and I got to see one of the craziest movies I've seen in a long time, Brandon
Mm-hmm.
Cronenberg's Infinity Pool. I
Mm-hmm.
went there because Brandon Cronenberg was supposed to be there to do an introduction. All of a sudden, Alexander Skarsgård and Mia Goth show up,
Yes.
and I'm
Yes.
like, that's Mia Goth, who was in Pearl and X, and
Mm-hmm.
who's going to be in Maxine, the final
Mm-hmm.
part of Ty West's trilogy, and she's right in front of me. And
Mm-hmm.
Alexander Skarsgård, the Northman, True Blood. Um, my wife hates me right now because she was not in the room with me when he was there. Uh,
Right.
yeah, she told my sister-in-law this morning, and she's a nurse, so she must have been doing it overnight because it was like 6 a.m. And she's like, "Where is he? I need to see him now." I'm like, "I'm sorry, but here's a picture I took of him." I'd love to be here talking to you about Infinity Pool or our soon to debut two-part top 10 of 2022. Genius idea to break that up into two parts because we went long on that one. But instead, on my anniversary,
Mm.
we're here. And by the way, I did go out with Athena. We had a lovely night. We had a nice dinner. So don't think I'm doing this video in lieu of her. uh, but
Oh man.
on my anniversary, tired from the movies the night before,
Yeah.
I'm here, and we're gonna talk about the Mayfair witches.
Oh
And
man.
yeah, that just doesn't bring out the excitement in me. I feel like I've tried to defend this show for
Mm-hmm.
a little bit. For the it might not have seemed like I was, but I was kind of trying to give it the benefit of the doubt through flaws that I noticed.
Yeah.
And like I said to you before we started recording, we're 3 episodes in to a
Mm-hmm.
show where witches is in the title, and
Mm-hmm.
there's just not a lot of witch stuff going on. Um, there's you know there's happy romantic funeral dances that are happening,
Yeah.
but oh my god, yeah. What did you think of this episode? I'm just gonna go chase my cat away from destroying my house. I'll be right there. I can hear you though.
Okay. Um. So for me, I actually liked this episode the best out of all 3 episodes so far. Believe it or not. But I say that with a but. If you were to say to me, "Hey Pete, let's not cover this show anymore moving forward," I'd be like, "That's okay with me." For me, there were interesting moments in this show. There was intriguing stuff this particular episode, but I'd hate to say I don't really like talking badly about someone's acting or targeting a specific person, but I do feel like maybe Alexandra Daddario was not cast right for this role, and I feel like there's like a lot of overacting on her part. Um, since episode 1, we're in episode 3 now. There's been multiple scenes where she kind of like confronts a person or like she reacts very strongly, usually to like a male character, and it just really seems fake. Like I think she's doing a good job. I always say this every single episode. I think she was really great in season 1 of The White Lotus, but she's a much more subdued character on there. In this, there's this one scene where, and here's spoilers, she gets with Cyprian Graves or whatever the fuck his name is. She's in his apartment in New Orleans, and she's just fucking mean as hell to him. And it just seems like her character is very one-dimensional. Like she's this badass surgeon who has this power, and if you confront her, if you try to talk down to her in any way, if you try to tell her what to do, she's gonna bite your head off, or maybe make you have an aneurysm, right? So I understand not wanting to watch this show. However, I do think there were some interesting parts. I mean, come on, what about the part with the servant smashing her head into the wall, man? Come on.
So
I thought we were
that but like that's my thing. I don't know. I liked this as an episode of television.
yeah.
This episode was directed by Axel Caroline, she did maybe my favorite episode of television ever. She directed the flashback episode of Haunting of Bly Manor.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she directed a couple other movies that I thought were really good. I think one of them was the Manor, which was an Amazon Prime horror film that came out in maybe early 2022, and that was really good too. She's a great director, but my issues with this episode were, yes, you mentioned that some of the acting, like Rowan's mom, who she's never met before. First time she ever meets her at the end of the last episode, the elevator door opens. The elevator door opens and her throat is slit.
Yeah.
And you're like, so the first time she ever sees her mother in the flesh is her mother's dead or dying. And later that day, she takes a shower and goes out and goes for a like smiley, happy walk through New Orleans, encounters a funeral march, takes a drink in the street, which obviously contains some kind of,
Drugs.
mysterious witchy stuff. And she's making out with masked Lasher in the middle of a funeral procession through a cemetery on the day her mother died.
Right.
And I always bring up, because of the way the movie's paced, you never realize that like Simba sings Hakuna Matata the day his father dies. Like the way that movie's paced, The Lion King. Yes, I'm talking about The Lion King and a Mayfair, which is review. If you go back and watch The Lion King, and you have a young daughter,
I do.
So you put on Lion King, and like the father, Mufasa, dies in the stampede. Simba runs from the hyenas, and he like runs off, and he's found passed out by Timon and Pumbaa.
Yes.
And it's basically, you're made to think that, it's later that day, he's passed out in the desert. They find him, and a few minutes later, they're singing Hakuna Matata. And during Hakuna Matata, that's when they do he ages up slowly into the big lion. But it's like, he watched his father die. He was chased out of his kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's singing It Means No Worries for the Rest of Your Days.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I thought of watching this episode, where it's like, oh my God, I walk into the elevator. I'm excited to maybe meet my birth mother for the first time.
Right.
And there she is with her throat sliced open, gushing blood, dying in front of me.
Right.
I need to literally wash her blood off of me in the shower.
Right.
Put on some new clothes and hit New Orleans.
Well, okay. It's not as simple as that, though. But I do think that we should try to trademark this. Are you saying it's like the Hakuna Matata moment or the Simba moment? Like, what do we name that? Because that is the thing that does happen in movies, where it's like someone just died, but then we're gonna like party. Like, what is that?
the Hakuna Matata moment is good. That's like, like the Mandela effect, the
Right.
Hakuna, the Matata,
The
But like,
Matata effect. I like that.
you
Streaming
brought
on
up, the maid, the servant who
yes,
is given,
the
and
necklace.
from what I'm gathering, it's like you can Lasher is like con- connected to that necklace, and it like keeps him at bay, even though after the necklace was on the woman, Lasher's out with Alexandra Daddario. So I don't even understand
Right.
any of the magic of the show so far.
Yeah, that's a
But
good point.
that, from a horror standpoint, I thought that was a great scene where the aunt gives the necklace to the maid,
Yeah.
and then says, "Okay, don't worry about it. She wanted you to have it. Come on, something." And then there's something that keeps her locked in the basement, and
Right.
all the lights go out, and I'm like, "Oh shit, that's a good scene." It goes right to commercial, and I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, that's a way to rip all the tension out of a moment, is to set up a really good tense moment and then jump to 3 minutes of commercials. So
Yes.
we come back and we don't go back to that basement for 15 to 20 minutes. And then, yeah, it's really fucked up when she's bashing her head and there's nothing left of like jaw up. There's just nothing left. And it's gross, and it's kind of awesome. And you're like, okay, this is the type of shit I thought I was going to see, like Interview with a Vampire, where there's a ton of like vampire gore. And it's just like,
Yeah.
the moment was lost, though. The moment was lost. And this episode also started back in Ireland, and we got another weird scene in Ireland. This one without any tree sex. Uh,
Yeah. Wasn't it Scotland?
oh, Scotland. Yeah. I, I don't know. It feels like everything about the show is a little bit off. The pacing is a little bit off. The acting is a little bit off. And then even when they get you with that one really good tense moment, something is off about it, because instead of paying it off, they cut to commercial, and then they don't even come back to it for another 10 minutes. And like, Interview with a Vampire was 7 episodes, and the way we reviewed that show, because we got into that late, and
Right.
we ended up doing like episodes 1 through 6, and then we did like a
Right.
big review of the finale.
Right.
And I feel like, Brian made this point in our like group chat about The Last of Us, about how it's great to have, in the days of Netflix binging, it's great to have episodic TV still, and like
Yeah.
that you could talk about. And you know, I feel like I might like this show more if I was just, and we can kind of do like a 40-minute discussion on episodes 1 through 8, because I don't
Yeah.
think there's enough. I just don't think there's enough going on. Like, I don't, we're 3 episodes in, and I don't understand the powers that the characters have. I don't
Right.
understand the magic of the
Right.
and I'm frustrated to a point where I almost don't care anymore, which isn't
Right.
good.
Right.
So I don't know. I thought this was going to be a great show to cover because of how much we loved Interview with a Vampire, and I
Right.
thought, when you're creating the Immortal Universe,
Right.
like the MCU, if you're going to throw the word universe into something, everything's got to be connected. And
Right.
this, so far, there's no connection. We're 3 episodes in. We're 3 hours of television in. There's no connection to Interview with a Vampire. And if we don't get that soon, like, I have it on DVR. It's recording. It's gonna be on my TV, but it's just
Yeah.
a matter of you know, it just worked out this week. We usually cover for this show. It comes out on Sunday. We usually film our review on Monday. It just so
Yeah.
happened Monday I didn't come home from work. I went straight to Alamo Drafthouse to see Infinity Pool.
Yeah.
Crazy movie. Today I even told you I didn't think we were going to be able to record because it's my anniversary and I thought I was going to be out and not around this late in the evening.
Right.
So, and like there wasn't a part of me that was like, damn, I'm not going to be able to watch Mayfair Witches until it.
Yeah.
Where if this was Interview with a Vampire, I would have been like, first of all, Athena watched Interview with a Vampire with me.
Yeah.
She loved it, every minute of it, and was like super excited about it. And she doesn't really care to watch this show, not because she's heard anything, she's just not really interested in it. Maybe she didn't like the books as much, or I don't know. But
Yeah.
there's just something missing from this series for me.
Yeah. Well, you brought up the MCU and its interconnectivity. The thing is, with Marvel, pretty much right away, they did give us little glimpses into other stories within each movie, right? You see Nick Fury at the end of Avengers. They show us Cap's shield. They show us Thor's hammer. These little glimpses. With all of that, though, having a knowledge of Marvel comics, I got references that maybe not the regular person would get, right? And I knew, oh, this is probably
That's
coming.
a good
This is
point.
coming. Yeah, yeah. And with this show, because I know certain things, it seems like it's connected, right? Like they are always talking about the Talamasca, and the Talamasca is a group that's almost like the shield of the Anne Rice world, right? There was that dark universe that they were going to do with like the Mummy, and they were going to have Russell Crowe be Mr. Hyde. He had a group that was called like Prodigium or something like that. That's kind of
Yeah.
what the Talamasca is like. It's like a group that
Are they the ones that were like that went to the apartment and were like pouring salt
yes.
outside? See,
So
like
okay, so
that scene, I like that scene. I like the idea of like cleansing the house and like protecting
right.
it. That reminded me of Supernatural, which Athena is watching with Charlotte. An episode a day. So it'll only take Charlotte until she finishes high school.
Right.
But like, yeah,
Well,
that reminded me of like that show.
yeah, and the Talamasca stuff is interesting in the books, and in the show, it kind of feels like Men in Black kind of Shield thing, where they're like, oh man, there's this dangerous entity. We don't really know a lot about it. We're gonna try to keep it contained. We're gonna form a perimeter around this house. Well, Lasher, as powerful as he is, he starts a fire. Like you kind of before were talking about Rowan going out and going for like a stroll and joining this, funeral parade. The thing is, her journey was prompted by Lasher causing a fire in that house, right? So she left because she thought there was literally the house was on fire. So like her reactions, I agree with you, are definitely off from what they should be. But I do think that like at least in that instance, it was because something happened plot wise that moved her along. Like she wasn't just like, oh, my mom died, let me go have a good time out in the street.
Yeah.
But with that being said, like it is very ambiguous as to Lasher's power. Like one thing I know from reading the Anne Rice books, or the few Anne Rice books that I have read, is that the vampires themselves are connected to, at least their origins are connected to spirits, and Lasher is a very powerful spirit. Um, the Talamasca is scared of the spirits because they can do certain things. Like the reasons why the vampires are so powerful is because of spirits. And we'll probably see that on the Interview with the Vampire show eventually, once they start adapting the Vampire Lestat and also Queen of the Damned. And hopefully they'll do a good job of it, unlike the movie with Aaliyah, right? But like one thing that I was going to say about this show, because whenever they went away from Rowan, I liked it. I really do feel like Rowan is the main problem for me. Like her overreacting to everything is the problem. But when they
Yeah,
went
and
to
I agree with you. I don't know if that's completely on Alexandra Daddario or if that
right,
is the way she's
the,
being written, the way
Right.
her character is written, the way
Right.
she's doing. Like we made a joke, like with the Dr. Gordon in Saw. I'm a doctor. I'm a doctor. She says it again in this episode. At the beginning,
Yeah.
the cop is like, "Oh, you saw a woman with her throat slashed, and you ran towards her." And she's like, "I'm a doctor. Thought I
Right.
could help."
Right. Right.
And it's
Right.
like,
Exactly.
you do. It's just repetitive dialogue. I'm a doctor. You know, I, I, I don't need constant reminders that she's a doctor, and I
Right.
don't need like, yeah, it's just it's very strange. But I do agree with you because I like the scenes in this episode that I thought were the best ones were the scene where with the woman in the basement, the scenes with uh, them putting the salt around the building and like cleansing the building in a way. I even like the
Yeah.
scene in the morgue. I thought
Right.
was a pretty good scene where
Yeah.
he's putting his hand. He takes the glove off, and he's trying to like. He puts his hand on Annabeth Gish's body, Deidre's body,
Right.
to you know see what's going on there. And I even like the little interaction he has with the other morgue attendant, who's like, "Yeah, that was a real live witch. You just put your hands on an actual witch."
Yeah.
And I was like, that's kind of cool. I like that. It's New Orleans. People do believe in that shit in New Orleans. I've been there several times. Like
Right.
there's serial killer tours, there's ghost tours, there's voodoo shops. Like all
Right.
of that shit. Like they believe in that stuff. So
Right.
I like that.
You know, you mentioned Sipper and Grieve and the morgue scene. I actually really like that scene a lot myself. And the thing is, I was thinking about Sipperin throughout this show so far, and he's been very kind of meek seeming, right? Like he's very soft spoken. Um, Rowan talks to him, and she pretty much like just tells him what to do. Like he doesn't have authority over her, even though he's far more knowledgeable of what's going on. She's just kind of bossing him around. And I was thinking about that a lot. There's this one YouTuber that I watch a lot. His name is the Critical Drinker, and I almost get worried about talking about him on our shows because I feel like he's so far on one side of the spectrum where he's always talking about how there's an agenda in Hollywood, in the shows that we watch, in the movies that we watch, and it's always about essentially getting rid of any kind of power in male characters and making the female characters superior. And he's so extreme with that it's like I don't really want to even endorse it, but I don't think that he is completely without validity. I think that like on a lot of these shows, and I think that this show maybe even suffers from it too, there's this sense of like the female character knows what they're doing, they're the ones that should have the power, and the male characters are kind of like bumbling or dumb. And I was thinking that with Cyprian, I was starting to get that vibe, but I actually do kind of appreciate that he is not talking down to her, that he does seem kind of meek. Like you could easily have this character be like dictating to her and kind of almost be like this adventurous character that brings her in like you don't know the dangers of this world, and he's like brings her in and it's like a mentor type, but instead they've done the opposite where he almost seems like intimidated by her. And I don't know, I think that's an interesting choice. I hope that it's not a choice because essentially they want to just really have like girl power and really make it like the women are the badasses. Like I feel like
Well,
that
I
might
mean,
be. Go ahead.
oh no, I agree with you. But like also, if the Mayfair witches are like really powerful and he is a part of that world, then maybe he does like know how powerful she could be. And
Right.
he's just being cautious, because of, right now her power is like raw and untapped. And, she doesn't know how to, master. Yeah, I feel like now I feel like she should go to Hogwarts. It's like,
Well, I gotta say though that she is very dangerous just based on the show, right? Like she's had
yeah,
three encounters where her anger has almost killed two people and did kill one person, right? So that's
Yeah.
she's very dangerous, right? And she's in an elevator with the woman who has her throat slit. They didn't say who slit her throat, by the way, but I think that's going to be like an ongoing mystery. Um, with Lasher, though, I want to go back to this one point that you made about how like we don't really know his powers, and it's like he was seemed to be bound to that servant woman in the basement, but then he was also walking around outside. I think that maybe him being bound to her makes him weaker. It doesn't necessarily maybe bind him to a specific location. And this is just
Okay.
speculation. This is just from reading comics and stuff. Often in comics, you'll have like a really powerful entity that's like bound to a human, and it sort of like grounds them and it like kind of keeps them humble. And I think that that's
Yeah.
probably what they're doing there. Like there's a character in DC called the Spectre, and he's like super fucking powerful, right? He can like do things to the whole earth, but he's like bound to this one guy, and so it kind of keeps him stable and humble. Ghost Rider's like that. There's things like that.
But
Um,
that's kind of
right,
how I felt watching Moon Knight,
right.
where
That's
like
actually a good
he
example. Yeah,
he's got like the power. He's possessed by like the
Khonshu.
actual Egyptian gods,
Right, right, right.
but they don't have the full power unless like he allows his alter ego or other identity to take over. And yeah, I could see where she would fit into that mold as a character. I just don't feel I'm very invested in that character, and that's the problem. After 3 hours of television, to not be invested,
Yeah,
like television, I'll always be a movie person over a TV person, where
sure,
you don't
sure.
have these debates in a movie. It's like if if you sit down, especially if you're at home, if you sit down and you're at home and you put on a movie and it's 20 minutes in, you're like, well, yeah, I'm not. Athena and I watched. We put on The Gray Man with
Oh
Chris
yeah.
Evans and Ryan Gosling, two of our favorite actors. Athena thinks they're both, drop dead gorgeous. We were really looking forward to watching that on Netflix. We made it 20 minutes. We turned it off. We and
Yeah.
it not saying it's bad. It might
Right.
be a kick-ass action movie. We weren't into it, and we were like, nah, don't care.
Right.
It's like with a TV show, you're more willing to go, oh well, okay, they have to start off slow because they're going to build, and then in the next will pay off later, and you end up investing hours, which turn into days, lifespan turn into like probably months of your life on certain shows, and
Right.
like I feel like at this point, if I'm at a point where I'm not enjoying something,
Yeah.
like I'd much rather sit and watch the same 2 hour movie that I love, or even 3 hour movie that I love over and
Right.
over again, than watch 8 hours of a show where I just keep waiting and waiting and waiting and hoping that it's good. And
Yeah.
I'm at the 3 hour stage. So I don't know, maybe next week, maybe now that Rowan finally spoke to the ghost of her mother and encountered Lasher, I just keep all the previews. If you remember when Interview with a Vampire was on, they had all these previews for Mayfair Witches, and
Right.
every one of those previews had a scene where there was like a coven of witches standing in a
Yeah.
circle, and I'm like, how have we not gotten to that yet? Like, how have we
I
not
know.
even seen any of that yet?
Yeah. I know, believe
So
me. I I'm all down for not watching this show anymore after this episode. Maybe we'll give next week a chance, but like we're not guaranteed to come do a review. Like you can easily send me a message and be like, dude, I'm out. And I'm okay. But before we do that though, I do want to give some praise for this show. Like I actually did like that sequence where she was walking through the cemetery and it was that little funeral march. I thought that like the way that that was
I
shot,
I thought it was
good.
yes, I thought it was a beautifully shot scene. I thought the style of the filmmaking of the way it was done was
Yeah.
great. Um, I just didn't like her like drunkenly or like and I know that there was probably something magical in the thing that she drank, but like it just really me that this was all happening hour after she took the shower to wash the blood of her dead mother off her body. But
Right,
like,
right.
yes, I do agree with you. The way that it was shot with Lasher kind of floating in and out of existence, it felt like I thought that was really cool. I love anything that shows like those New Orleans style funeral marches. I think it was, or like anything that like reminds me of Day of the Dead is just fantastic.
Dia de los
There,
Muertos. Yeah, yeah, that's a big
there
thing
was there
here in
was a
Austin.
James Bond. One of the Daniel Craig James Bond movies
Yeah,
started with
yes,
like a
that
20
was
minute Day of the Dead Spectre.
Spectre was the one. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and it was like
and it
literally what?
isn't there a James Bond that like has like a New Orleans bad guy that is like a voodoo bad guy? Isn't it like fucking
That was
Yaphet
that was
Kotto and stuff?
yeah, that was Roger Moore.
Right.
I to live and let die
Yeah.
maybe.
Right. Right.
I'm not sure, but yes, he was. That was Yaphet Kotto as a uh, New Orleans, and there's a lot of like voodoo stuff in that one. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was, and I saw all the Bonds, so that was one of my I enjoyed that one.
Yeah, I love the Dia de los Muertos motif, and the thing is, I don't want to get people mad at me by saying that that's the same thing because I think in New Orleans it's like a voodoo thing, and that's like Baron Samedi is that sort of that painted black face, but then
Mm-hmm.
also the skull kind of face. That's like Baron Samedi. I actually really like the one guy that was like on stilts who was dancing throughout that whole sequence, and then I thought one thing that was really great about that sequence was that um, you you had like the regular people who looked interesting to begin with. Then you cut to, oh wait, is that a dead person? Like, is that guy's eye missing? Oh, is that another like corpse? And then the guy who they're honoring at the funeral is sitting on top of like the carriage and he's like dancing. And I just thought that that part was really well done, you know?
Yeah, I did love that. That was excellent. The way it went from like, look at all these people wearing like masks and like face paint and makeup, and wow, that makeup looks really crazy. Like that might be a zombie. And then like
Right.
she wakes up and like it turns out like it was all in her head and she was like passed out against the wall, and you're like, oh shit, that was. And the the bright parts of this episode, I'm going to credit to Axel Caroline. Um, that episode that she did of Haunting a Bly Manor, I feel like I must have rewatched it like 5 times. Um, I think it's episode 7. I think it's the penultimate episode, and
Yeah.
it's so freaking good. It's like basically the background, the black and white background of the entire Bly Manor and all of the hidden characters that you've been looking at and all the ghosts that you've been seeing. And it basically, it's such a good episode.
Yeah.
And she knows what she's doing with horror, like the visuals stuff, that funeral march sequence, the basement sequences. Like there's a lot of good scary imagery here. I
Yeah.
just don't know if the episode was paced well, and then the acting kind of feels scatterbrain. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I feel like
Yeah.
we've been kind of making the same, hemming and hawing about these same issues since the first episode. And I feel like, for me at least, I was like, yeah, I didn't really like this, but I like where it's going. I didn't really like this, but I could see, this kind of like light at the end of the tunnel here. And now I just got to a point where I was just like, I just want to see witches in a circle, like conjuring some shit with magic.
Yeah.
And like, how have we, like, we're almost at the halfway point of a season of television. How have we
Yeah.
not gotten to that yet? So yeah,
Yes.
let's how about this? Let's watch next week's episode, and we will only review next week's episode if we have positive, not that we're going to be like, sheep on YouTube that only want to be, positive reviewers, because I feel like we're kind of shredding this show for 3 episodes.
Yeah.
But I would like to be positive about it, because I think everything is in place for there to be a good television show here.
Yeah.
And so I think we watch next week's episode, and then we message each other, what did you think? And if we're more positive than negative, we come on and we review episode 4.
Yes. I like that a lot. And also, if you guys watching at home are like, hey, we actually watched the last cast because you talk about Mayfair witches, please, then say that in the comments. We'll keep going. But haven't really got a lot of comments. We did get one comment today I saw that was from a guy that watched your Infinity Pool video, and he was like, man, I'm so sick of Mia Goth and her Peppa Pig voice. So you gotta write back to that guy, Danny, okay?
Are you,
But
I cannot imagine. And look, everybody's entitled to their opinion, but after the 2022 she had, and after watching Infinity Pool, I cannot imagine somebody like loudly complaining, I've had enough of Mia Goth, because I'm just ready for her to be in like everything. Like the Oscar nominations came out today. If I had a vote, she would have gotten a Best Actress nomination. Rebecca Hall would have been nominated for Resurrection, 2 of the movies that we talked about that are going to be featured on our top 10 list, which is coming out soon. And yeah, if you like Infinity Pool, if you like Possessor, you should go check out the little non-spoiler review.
yes.
And yeah, tell us what
Cool,
you
man.
think of Mayfair Witches so far.
Yeah. And you know what? You guys can say fuck you to the Oscar nominations for not noticing horror. Speaking of horror and awards, though, I did actually recommend to the Splatterpunk Awards a book that I read this year in 2022. It's called Clickers Never Die. There's a review on this channel, an interview with author Stephen Kozanowski. But I actually have a couple more interviews I need to edit and throw up on the channel too. But we try to get the word out there for horror movies, horror shows, and horror books as well. So if any of that shit tickles your funny bone, then make sure that you subscribe to our channel too. And maybe we'll see you for some more Mayfair Witches, but guaranteed we'll see you for some more horror content. See y'all.